Alright, last time we wired up all of our income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statements for Yum. This time we're going to make common size income statement and balance sheets. These are pretty simple to do, won't take very long if you set it up right. And so I'm going to start with the income statement. I just right click here on the income statement tab, move or copy, create a copy, and it'll make a second income statement for me. And I'm going to call this one common size income statement. Okay, CSIS. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to wire everything in here relative to the original income statement, but I just want them all as percents of sales rather than the nominal values, and that way when we can see like revenue going up, etc., we can still see if like for instance food and paper also went up when our revenue went up, but we'll be able to see if the percent of the revenues, if it's eating more of our margin and things like that pretty easily. So all I have to do is go to this first cell here, B4. I'm going to hit equals, and I'm going to click over to the income statement tab. And for that year, revenues were $13,279. So I'm going to use this as my denominator. And this is my numerator to create the percentage. Right? Now when we drag it, the key here is when we drag this over in our common size one, we're going to want it to lock on the revenues as we go down, so it uses the same revenue number on all the 14 numbers, but uses this revenue number on all the 13 numbers. So we have to lock our denominator to make it do that. So we want it to lock this denominator, but we want it to float column to column, just not row to row. Okay, so we want to lock B, not 6. Okay, we want it, or I'm sorry, 6, not B. Other way around. So I'm going to put a dollar sign in front of the 6 so that it keeps this row. So when we drag it over, it'll stay in the 6s. When we drag it down, it'll stay in the 6s. But it will not keep B. So when we drag it down, it'll make all these relative to B. But when we drag it over, it'll make them all relative to C. So we're going to leave it like this. Okay, B $6. Hit enter. Change to a percent. Give it a couple decimals, and then we should be able to just drag over, drag down to here, and everything should be happy. Okay, so that's really all we had to do, and you'll be able to see if you did it right, because all of the total revenues should be 100% of revenues, stuff like that. Like I said, now we can look at like paper, 27.25% went up to 28. 28.5, 28, it's come back down to 27. So you can see as a percentage of sales how much our different expenses are over time. If it's pretty flat like this, where it's stayed in the 19s, or if there's variation in any of those things. So, you know, look, general administrative expenses have gone down from original. Not a lot, but we can see stuff like that pretty quickly. So these are useful for that sort of thing. We're going to do the same thing with balance sheet, only then we're not going to do revenues. So I'm going to go to balance sheet, and we're now going to do percent of assets. So we'll use this total assets number as our common size, so we can see like how much of our assets is property, plant, and equipment as a percentage, and if that's been changing too. So I'm going to take my balance sheet, again, move or copy, create a copy, OK. Move it over here, I'm going to call it common size balance sheet. And then again, the common size balance sheet, I'm just going to start with the first one. It's going to equal, go to the balance sheet. You want it to equal the same cell, the same relative cell from the one before. So since we're going to B4, we want to start with B4 divided by our denominator that we want to keep, so total assets for that year. And then we just lock the row, putting a dollar sign in front of the 18, hit enter, it'll go back to the common size, change that to a percent, add a couple decimals, and same thing as before, we can just drag it down, and That's it. Okay, so again, we get a bunch of percentages. We can see if anything weird has changed. You can see things like property, plant, and equipment. Used to be 46% of their assets. It's up to 54% of their assets almost. So that's gone up a lot. So you can start seeing things like that really quickly. If there's anything else of interest in here, debt and equity is always a big one from balance sheets, right? So we can see like long-term debt has been actually was going down. It looks like they issued some more this year, and we'll be able to track things like that as their debt kind of went back up. And so we can look at balance sheet if we're trying to figure out what's going on there. Long-term debt actually was pretty flat, and it did go up, but not a whole lot. Last year, actually, their assets went down and their debt went up. So that's what did that. So we can kind of use this to kind of look for trends and things. There's lots of stuff you can pull out of here. But anyway, that's common sizing. We don't generally common size cash flow statements. You can. The problem is there's lots of negatives and positives, and so you get lots of negative percentages, and you got to read things a little bit weird if you want to do that, like relative to net income or something. But for now, just common size income statement and balance sheet is fine. All right, that was a quick and easy one. Next time we'll cover pro formas.